Welcome to the Botanical Garden of the Northwest University in Potchefstroom, South Africa. Among the many experiences that the garden offers to visitors is the Byderhand Garden Poems, a locative literature installation by the Department of Creative Writing. The multimodal installation comprises a collection of standalone poems, accompanied by voice recordings, translations, animations, musical arrangements, and even physical artwork. Please join me in the garden while I tell more about the project and reflect on the interaction between hawking experiences and the co-creation of locative poetry. As a project leader, I spent many hours in the garden getting to know the place and considering project possibilities. In the project, which was conceptualized for an annual arts festival, we invited poets to write poems with the garden as the focus. The contributions also included poems about food baths and hiking experiences. Join me on the path up the man-made reach to discover some of these poems.
Ons klim die klippepad teen die randjie op. Ons klim en klouter tot heel bo op die kop. Nou kan ons lekker rus en goed om ons kyk, hoe die dinge hier naby en daar ver vir ons lyk. Ek sien spore vir 'n trein en karre oor die brug, verder weg die randjies en bo die bloue lug. Het jy ook tot hier geklim? Sê dan vir my, as jy rondom jou kyk, wat sien jy?
Along with my children's poem is also a poem by Audrey Breed. Without discussing it, we both wrote about the climb up the ridge and the view at the summit.
Sometimes the longest walk in a garden is a short hike becoming too far. As dew draws into the seam of your pants, like clusters of blackjack weaving into your stocking stitching, and angled thorns catch the sleeve covering your elbow. Your shoe soles slip on morning mud. You have to step carefully, clinging onto protruding weed, while you climb the man-made mountain. You reach the top, expecting a view as reward, to find only litter left by the previous day's lovers on the bench you had in mind for sitting. And when at last you do sit down, you see behind you train tracks and roofs and a concrete precast wall, and in front of you, small bush and thicket and a branch. You have to invent a view for yourself. You try to listen beyond the humming of the truck on the Coltonville Road that you also notice from the hill, and the red car on the bridge, and the rattling going on at the new green engineering building, until you become aware of the clear crescendo from the thicket. Just in time comes the dove's cropped up turtling that's been there all along.
It is evident that our own embodied experience is reflected in the content, a writing practice that can be described as emplaced writing. In the project, we also invited artists to interpret the poems in other media. These two designers' experience in the garden contributed to the animation in which the climb up the hill is embodied. Where poets and artists could not visit the garden, they made use of images, videos, and other media to stimulate their material imagination. For example, Strydom van der Merwe listened to the voice recordings of the poems while creating his totem poles. The technical execution and testing also implied that the team walked a lot in the garden. The totem poles also had to be carried up the ridge. Characteristic of locative literature is that the writer and production team provide, through the selection of content as well as diverse design elements, a composed experience for the readers. In turn, the readers become, through active participation, co-creators of the work. Reader participants have to climb the ridge themselves before they can experience the poems at the summit. Observing the visitors, I realized in how many ways they are co-creating. Through their embodied and emplaced experience, by sharing with others, reading to each other, translating and explaining, discussing the poems and the experience, weaving their observations and experiences with that of the poet. Experiencing the garden and poems in different seasons and times of the day constantly offers new opportunities for co-creation. The Byderhand project took a new direction when the team was invited by a school for visually impaired learners to install locative literature on their school grounds. Their idea was to turn an old herb garden into a functional multisensory garden. As part of the exploration and planning, the learners and the team visited existing braille trails and multisensory gardens. The learners thoroughly enjoyed the experience and the diverse hiking surfaces. Their positive feedback, along with the content of the existing children's poems, led to the idea to create paths with various textures and surfaces. The Rocky Path poem is also part of the multisensory garden, but here a path was built especially for the poem. Learners can feel the rocks under their feet and imagine themselves climbing up the hill. The poem now also has a new addition in the form of sign language. Deaf learners can therefore also imagine climbing the hill while enjoying the poem and observing the environment. However, the biggest challenge was to make the poems accessible to users with visual impairment. The team visited several multisensory gardens and braille trails, experiencing firsthand the challenges and practical applications. Our solution was to develop a 3-layer interface, which consists of braille, an interface for people with low vision, and an auditory interface. Braille instructions to read the QR codes are available at the entrance.
The QR code has a braille frame around it, so that blind learners can easily feel the QR code. After the QR code is scanned, the link takes the user to the appropriate interface. The interface design is visually simple so that users with low vision can work with it. The interface is furthermore programmed for basic screen reader software so that it can also be accessible to blind users.
Voiceover on The House Where I Live, William Rowland.
When the user accesses the literature, the text's contrast and size can be adjusted. For the soundtrack, there is also a simple control bar, namely to play, replay, and stop the sound. Each text has a recorded soundtrack which is read by the author or by a voice artist.
Die sag trappad, die dennepad, die grasmatras hou my voete vas.
Railings and ropes also help the learners to find their way and to identify the poems and the information in the garden. The learners soon mastered the technology and are at home in the garden, enjoying the poems, the environment, and the fun and exciting learning experiences. The pandemic brought new challenges. Due to the lockdown, the botanical garden and the schools were closed, making the installations inaccessible. When the restraining measures were eased, green zones provided some freedom to people who have been confined for so long. We came up with the idea of a temporary garden poetry installation along the Mooi River in Potchefstroom. Through the seasons, visitors enjoyed the garden poems in an ever-changing environment. The Rock Path poem also found a place, next to an old cement staircase on the embankment. From the footpath up the ridge, the stones in the multisensory garden, and up the stairs to the embankment. Each of these contexts provide unique experiences for visitors, walking, climbing, imagining, co-creating. Our last project is part of a braille trail in the Karoo Desert National Botanical Garden in the town of Worcester in the Western Cape. This project is a culmination and embodiment of our journey with locative literature over the past 7 years, and a tribute to so many people who participated and created with us. Here too, we explored the new context by walking and observing and enjoying nature. The Braille Trail in the heart of the Botanical Garden was officially opened in September 2022. The trail is universally accessible and allows persons with disabilities to enjoy the unique Karoo landscape and flora. The Byderhand concept and interface are used along the entire trail, thus making the trail even more accessible.
Welcome to the Braille Trail. The trail is 154 meters long and takes you past various information signboards highlighting the natural environment of the Karoo and poems inspired by nature. All the signboards have QR code links to listen to the information. Between brackets, a sign to your right gives an explanation on how to use it. How to follow the trail. Touch the edge of the paving with your walking stick to guide you along the trail. The information stops are indicated by texture strips, like the one you are standing on now. There are also 2 benches placed along the way if you want to take a rest.
All the poets, including 2 poets with visual impairment, are from the town and region and write from personal experience about this unique landscape and about footpaths and walking.
The Return by Diana Ferris. Then you walked up the sand path, stumbled across a stone, and fell into a thorny bush. You forgot the cactus's name. The mountain slopes hung over the valley. The thorn tree, the flowering aloe, glittered red in that sun, the one you knew. The dry air filled your lungs, and the blue expanse charmed you like in earlier times. Nowhere in the world there was such a sky. How could you? The Dassie on the rock shouted. Why now? The swallow reproached. But when the dust spread its blanket over the town, you snuggled gently and closed yourself with the tender knowledge that you were back and that you never forgot about this place.